Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who understand that there's more to entrepreneurship than finding the latest flash-in-the-pan strategies, who understand that in order to build your empire, you need a solid foundation. I wholeheartedly believe that entrepreneurship is the biggest self-development journey you can be on, and it's my mission to help you make that journey easier. In this show, I bring together the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist and mindset coach behind this show, and you're listening to the Wired for Success podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to part 2 of my interview with naturopathic physician, author, and director of product development at Neurohacker Collective, Dr. Gregory Kelly. Last week, I released the first part of the interview where we talked about studying success so that we can identify the 20% of things that give us 80% of the results, why more is not always better, and about intentionally designing your environment, and so much more. So if you missed that episode, make sure you go back and listen to it. This is the second part of our interview, and we'll talk about the daily high-performance habits that he recommends. We will talk about trusting your intuition and paying attention to your body's signals, as well as about feeding your brain and what you want to eat, when you want to eat, and how much you want to eat in order to stay healthy. So enjoy the second part of this interview. Right, that leads us directly to the next thing that I wanted to ask you, because one thing that I tell the people I work with is that it's the small things that you do consistently that determine your results. So for instance, if they, work out once or twice a month for an hour, they won't see as much improvement as if they worked out for just 15 minutes, but did it at least 5 times a week, right? And that's why I find it so important to develop those daily high performance habits that make sure that we all stay happy and healthy in the long run. So I'm curious, can you share your personal favorite high performance habits with us? What do you do on a daily basis?
So, I'm a firm believer that the transitions of the day may be the most important for our brain and definitely for our body clock. So I'm by nature at this point in my life, like a very, so I guess my metaphor, then this goes to sleep, and I've used this for 20 years, is the way I believe sleep works is that the drive to sleep is like a bus or train that comes on a schedule. So, if we're paying attention, we'll start to feel that bus pulling into the station. We'll feel sleepiness, for lack of a better way to describe it. So we have a choice then. We can get on the bus, or we can choose to keep watching TV, reading a book, whatever we happen to be doing. And if we do make that decision, now we have to wait for the next one. But what commonly occurs is people will decide, well, I'm not going to get on this bus because I still have 40 minutes of this TV show or movie to watch. I'll just go to sleep when I feel like going to sleep. But it doesn't work like that. If we now go to sleep and lie in bed waiting for the next bus, that causes a lot, or can cause a lot of anxiety and other things, right? It's, so a lot of, to me, like it's important to catch that bus. And so that would be one thing. So the more aware we can be of the messages our body is sending us, I think is by far the single most important thing to get us to that high performing state. Because at least my baseline story is my body, as smart as I think I am about health, I'm going to assume my body knows better than I do what it needs. So if I can be attuned to what it's trying to communicate, that's way better than as smart as I want to be or as many podcasts as I want to listen to. So paying attention to those signals, and sleep just is one that if we start working on it and paying attention to it, I think that would be number one. I mentioned transitions. So like I'm fortunate, I live right by the Pacific Ocean. I can literally look from where I'm sitting right now out my window and see the sunset most of the year. But my commitment is most days to get outside for part of that time period. Doesn't have to be long, but even 5 to 10 minutes. And I also believe that the beginning of the day, as we're transitioning more into like the sun rising, so it doesn't have to be at sunset, but getting early in the day exposure to natural lighting helps lock our rhythms in at that time of day. So if we get just a little sunlight at the beginning, a little of that transition into darkness at the end, I think that really fortifies our body clock. And our body clock does so many different things that it seems like a small habit, like something that should be relatively insignificant. I think if we just do that, that makes a lot of other things work better that we do, whether that's getting more from our exercise, getting more from our meditation, or whatever we're doing. So like those would be the two things. Pay attention to the cues your body's sending you. Learn really to, and this would go to NLP, right? Learn its language, because I really believe that it's trying to communicate with us. And then, work on getting outside at the transition time periods. Because really, I don't know of any system in the body that's not tied to our circadian rhythms.
Right. I love that. And I love going for a run first thing in the morning. So I catch the nice sunrise and I get the fresh air and the exercise in the morning. And I really feel that this fuels me and it raises my energy levels as compared to going for a run in the evening, for example. That's something I used to do in the past. So I was someone who always, would go to the gym after work or something like that. But then some years ago, I transitioned to doing my workouts in the morning. And I found that to be much more effective, to really set me up, or to really start the day in that high performance zone, to get the blood flowing and my brain working. And yes, I totally agree with you on that. So
But I also think if we go back to that idea of mental energy. So I think at the beginning of the day is when we recharge that battery. Yeah. So we've got, likely as high an amount as we're going to have over our waking periods early in that time period. Now, some people, like I'm one of those people, I jump out of bed, I'm ready to go. I've, known lots of people that they need their cup of coffee to get going. But sometime in that relatively early part of the day, we're likely to have our biggest charge for brain energy. And what conversely you would see is after a long day of work, doing all the things an entrepreneur needs to do, is they've used a lot of that energy. And like mental energy, again, just in a simple sense, like that, how we need that for motivation and drive. So I'm sure people that experience this. You have great intentions to go to the gym or to work out after work, and you drive right by the gym and stop, somewhere and get a drink or get food, right? So to me, if I was finding myself doing that, then the fix isn't more willpower. It's that either I need to build more energy reserves, or I need to shift the time that I intend to do this to a time of day where I do have the energy. And then the other thing that you would routinely see is you get to the gym and you do a half-hearted effort, or maybe you decide, okay, I'm going to do this routine, and then you unplug or do like it's usually called disengaging in the exercise terminology. You'll go through the motions instead of being really focused. And one of the things that's come out of exercise and brain research is the focus that we do exercise with is as important, if not more important, than doing the exercise. So we need that. We can't just go through the motions and expect we're getting much in that 80-20 sense from the time we've invested in exercise. We need to be able to go in and have enough mental energy to be focused on what we're doing as well. So I think it's great that you do it at the beginning of the day, because for most people, that's going to be a time that is naturally better to be able to do it and be focused while doing it.
Yeah, let's talk about nutrition for a moment. So we know that the brain is a very energy hungry organ. So what do you think about different types of diet and how they affect brain performance? So do you follow a certain type of diet, like vegan or Mediterranean or whatever else is out there?
I would be more of an intuitive eater. Okay. So I wouldn't subscribe to any diet. I try to pay attention to what my body seems to want. And I was a vegetarian for 6 years, so I've done that. I don't know if you've ever talked about blood type on your podcast or would have looked at D'Adamo's work, but I'm a blood type A, which in his construct does better on a vegetarian diet. And I was in his practice. I saw the new patients in Diadamo's practice in the late 90s for 3 years. And there was a truism there. A's tended to do better on a more vegetarian diet. O's did much better on a more, what we would think of as a paleo style diet. So I know I do way better in general on a Mediterranean or something like, I think of the Japanese diet. Mm-hmm. So, rice, vegetables, small amount of seafood. I'm Irish by ancestry, and we would have had a similar diet, right? I think we'd have had oats and potatoes as our starch, but some seafood, maybe some lamb. So I tend to think the ancestral piece can sometimes be important. So like, what did your unique genetics evolve to eat? Mm-hmm. So I know I do much better on lamb than any other meat. So like, I tend to eat a fair amount of lamb. I do really well on seafood. But in a big picture sense, the Mediterranean diet, I think, is one of the best for our brain. So if in doubt, that is a fantastic starting point for most people. But then when I say intuitive, and this has more to do with just, again, checking in. So I know if my body is saying, I want watermelon, then like, I'll get it watermelon, right? I was started to do a several day something. Do you know the fasting mimicking diet, Walter Longo's work?
No.
Instead of a water fast for 3 to 5 days, it would be, it reduces calories down to about 800 calories a day, almost no protein. You're allowed good fats like avocados, olives. And it's been well studied. He's done a great job. His lab out of the University of Southern California, I believe it is. So if you don't want to do a water fast, but want to get most of the short-term benefits of that, the fasting mimicking diet is a great way to do it.
Right.
So I had intended to do a fasting mimicking diet a few weekends ago for 3 days. And I had also started a new workout routine. So all the gyms in San Diego are closed. So it's called an X3 bar, but it's basically heavy duty straps with a bar. So you're doing more of a variable resistance exercise. And that I found that workout to be incredibly fatiguing for my muscles. So I think 2 days into this fast with the intention I was going to do at least 3. And my body was like, no, we're done. We need meat. So that's where the intuitive piece comes in. That like, I assume that if my body's really sending a strong message, that maybe I should listen to it.
Right. Sounds good to me.
So like, I think things like what I get concerned about is when people become dogmatic on their diet.
Right.
So when I was in naturopathic school, I was fortunate. I had some really great teachers, and unfortunately remember relatively little of their wisdom. But the one piece that stuck with me was this one long-term naturopathic doctor said, my experience is there can often be a huge difference between a diet that took someone from unhealthy and moved them to healthy, and one that keeps them at healthy. So don't assume that just because something moved you there, that it's going to keep you there. And what he had seen is quite often it would move them right past unhealthy in a new direction. Mm-hmm. So when I see people that are dogmatic about their diet, I hope it works for them, but I would want them to watch to make sure that what was working for them continues to work for them.
Right.
Because what you see with keto is that it like often doesn't. I've known lots of people that were successful vegans or vegetarians for a long period of time. And this was funny. This was someone he worked in the dietary supplement industry when I met him, but he had been a hardcore vegetarian, same with his wife. And one day they were in like a high-end cafeteria somewhere, and they were just going through the line. They got to the cashier, and she's like, "Hey, honey, there's a piece of salmon on your plate. What's the deal?" And he didn't even know that he took it. Like his brain basically just overrode.
All right.
And then like took it for him. And so what you see with the brain is when a need hasn't been met, then like it will, like we assume it's our choices that drive our behaviors. And what I would say is it's a permissive system. So if we're not getting enough sleep, as an example, to meet our needs, our brain does what's called micro sleep. So we'll literally flicker in and out of sleep all day. We won't even be aware of it. Now, we may actually fall asleep while driving or something like that, but micro sleep can be even faster. It could be literally flicking in and out of sleep mode many times a minute. If we are super successful on a low calorie diet, but not routinely, but what can happen is called sleep eating, where people will sleepwalk in the middle of the night, raid their kitchen, and have no recollection of it whatsoever. So when we like, we're I guess, allowed to have this illusion that we're in control up until the point where the system just like, all right, you're not doing a good enough job here, so I'm gonna blank your brain out, or use the time where your brain's shut off to take care of fulfilling this need. So anyways, that goes back to the idea of bandwidth. If something's starting to really churn our bandwidth, I think it can be an important question to ask why. And is there something I can do to better meet this? Because there's obviously some part of me that feels like this needs attention.
Right. I think the only problem I see with the intuitive eating is that a lot of people will mistake their cravings and maybe addictions as their intuitive need for something. So, I mean, what do you say to the people who say, oh, my body feels like I should eat French fries all day long, or chocolate cake all day long?
So like, I had lots of judgment around that at one point. So the study really, so this is the gist of a study I saw, and that we wouldn't be allowed to repeat it now, but this was in the early 90s. And so they had a couple different groups of, I think they were lab rats, not mice, but mice or rats. And so what they knew is if they sleep deprived these small animals, that eventually they would go into a really catabolic state, lose, muscle, and die fairly quickly after that. So they thought, okay, well, we're pretty smart. Let's just give them a high protein diet and we'll get better results. So they had, kind of the control diet. They had a high protein diet. And then for this third group, they said, well, let's just let this third group do whatever they want. We'll put really fattening chow out, let them eat to their heart's content. So of those three groups, like all sleep deprived, one that's basically eating a normal amount of, like regular rat chow, one that's eating a normal amount but high protein, and one that basically can eat as much fattening rat chow as possible. Which would you expect outlived the others?
Well, you should expect that the one eating a regular diet does best, but from what you're saying, it sounds like it's probably the one who could choose freely what they wanted to eat.
Yeah, so they ate, I think it was about double the amount of food and outlived the others by about 40%, is my recollection. Right, so their intuition was way smarter for their circumstances than these scientists, is really what it boiled down to. So in that situation that you described, I would assume the key thing then isn't like the craving's important, but that craving may actually be intuitively correct for that circumstance. So to me, the key thing is then find what might be driving that craving. Exactly. So like inadequate sleep, we know will drive a craving for typically starchy, fatty food. Like that happened to me even in the Navy. Like I would have said, I knew what I should eat when I was in the Navy, and I did a good job controlling it most of the time. And then the rails would go off the track, and I would eat 50 fried shrimp all at one sitting, right? So like willpower only can get you so far when these cravings are building up. And what I would say the issue was my body clock misalignment and my chronic sleep deprivation. And when those were fixed, the cravings went away.
Right.
So what we can try to fight it head on, but that usually is something, if we don't satisfy that craving, my experience is it usually builds. Mm-hmm. Right. So if we're feeling like we're intuitively drawn to things that we know are not going to produce the results we want, then one option is willpower. One option is to improve the environment so those aren't accessible. So I don't keep French fries in my home, as an example. If I felt like I was craving them, I would check in and like, do we really want to make the trip to, restaurant to get French fries? And often, no. Sometimes drinking a glass of water and then checking back in 20 minutes later, that would be sufficient, right? What we were craving was more water. We can turn carbs into water better than some other foods. Maybe that's all we needed. But it would be like, my thing would be, let's take that message and see if we can figure out like what might be driving it, rather than focus so much on like, this is a bad thing, we can't eat it.
Yeah.
And if that craving keeps popping back up, then I would satisfy it.
Right, makes perfect sense.
And then the other thing, and I think so our intuitions are only as good as what we've experienced. This would be my belief about it anyway. So have you ever had persimmons? Do you know what those are?
Oh, the orange fruit?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's two varieties. One's like crunchy like an apple, and one gets really mushy. But so like I grew up in Massachusetts, persimmons just weren't a thing. And it was probably like 10 years ago at a farmer's market. I saw them, I knew what they were, but I'd never eat them. So I thought, oh, I'll buy a few persimmons. And over the next, like persimmon season here in San Diego runs from late September till almost Christmas. So it's a couple months in the fall. And I bet that fall I ate 20 kilos of persimmons. I couldn't get enough persimmons. But I think whatever that part that learns about food was like, oh, this is a new thing. I want to really learn this well. And once it did, it was like, okay, that needs set. I know everything I need to know about that. So now if I'm walking through the supermarket or farmer's market and see persimmons, and my brain's like, we should get those. I think it's coming from an educated place. Right. But if it had never learned about that, how would it know? Right. So to build good intuition about eating, we need to learn the vocabulary of food, I think. Right. So we need to not eat tons of things that are all these different flavors and things mixed together. We need to try a bunch of new things maybe that our brain doesn't have a good vocabulary on, learn about those, and then the intuition's going to be smarter.
I like this.
So anyways, that would be the other piece, right? Like if your system's stupid, for lack of a better way to describe it, because it hasn't been educated on things, the intuitions are going to be fairly naive as well. So like what I would start coaching people is, let's do that. Let's do that persimmon experiment. Try new things, listen to your body, and eat a bunch of that in a concentrated time so it can learn what that's about. And unfortunately, what happens, the way our brain, I believe, at least based on research, learns about food is through the flavor. And now if you just think of the strawberry flavor, we could eat 100 different things probably that are flavored like a strawberry that aren't a strawberry, which then creates all this confusion for that part that drives that intuition. So I think our intuitions I like to listen to mine, but I think they would perform better for most people if they ate a simpler diet.
Yeah. And I like that story because I often find that I have phases where I crave, like, say, grapes, and then for a week or two all I want to eat is lots and lots of grapes, and then I do that, and the next time it might be something like your watermelon, or so it's different. And I listen to that as well. Now what we eat is one thing, but how much and when we eat is another thing. So what's your opinion on caloric restriction and intermittent fasting, for example? Do you recommend them? Or
I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting, but not prolonged fasting. So like, and even for intermittent fasting, I think that term often can mean different things to different people. So there's a variant of that I would call time restricted eating. So basically we're eating all our food within a certain window of time. So I'm a big fan of that. I think food eating, that's a stress on our digestive system. So the more predictable we can be about when we're going to produce that stress, like the more regular we are, the more. So I think of digestion, we've got to get all the things together to digest the food, but then to protect our stomach and intestines against what we're doing to digest that food, and to protect against the food, and to make sure our immune system is there in case there's anything in the food. that it may need to do work on. And so I think time restricted eating, like that variant of intermittent fasting, most people will perform better if they do that. Now, the window of when that should start and stop, I'm not as fixed on, but what I've seen is that people that would have their first food later in the day, like maybe their first food's at 1, often end up having cravings for foods and snacks in the evening, leading into the bedtime time. And I think it's important to have a window of time before bed as often as possible that we're not eating. So one of the things that happens during the beginning parts of sleep is we actually produce a lot of stomach acid. And at least it's thought that maybe we do that evolutionarily as a way to clean up all the debris that built up during that day. But if we're still trying to digest food we just ate, then it can't really do that job.
True.
So I would tend to think, like, if your baseline case, start and stop earlier in the day as opposed to the window later. But ultimately, I think both can work for people.
Right.
So my caveat would be to the later one. If you do find yourself having cravings for snacks or foods late in the evening, then that might mean it's worth experimenting, shifting that window earlier. For then the more hardcore intermittent fasting, so like, sometimes that's can be a 5 days of regular eating, 2-day lighter eating, or 2-day water fast, or a 6-in-1, or a periodic water fast, like I mentioned, the fasting mimicking diet. I think those things for most people, like the periodic, a couple days to 5-day, I think is a great, maybe once a quarter thing to integrate in. And I've talked to the people that have studied the fasting mimicking diet. They always say 5 days. But when I ask them, well, does it follow the 80-20 rule? The answer was yes. Like most of the benefits happen by day 3. So I would say, having that built in, like some kind of a lighter eating couple day period once a quarter is a great habit. The longer than about 5 days, then I start to think, well, there's potential for adaptation. So like Biosphere 2, I think is a great story for this. So, I mentioned earlier, they thought they could grow enough food. They weren't able to. It led to them eating, I think the average was around 1,700 calories a day. So not a huge calorie deficit, but one that was every day. So over the first 6 months, they lost weight, pretty steadily, and then their weight plateaued. But when it plateaued, they were getting their lab work measured all the time. And so, thyroid hormone, all these different hormones you could see change as they were unable to eat enough food. And as soon as the 2 years were over and they left Biosphere 2 and could re-eat as much as they want, they regained all that weight really quickly. And this is in research often called body fat overshoot. So what happened, they regained the lost weight, but they didn't regain the lost muscle. Okay. So they were fatter at the same weight than they were before. And my belief is that it's something like, again, that part of our brain or system that regulates survival, saying, okay, I don't know when this body is going to decide to live in the desert in a dome again for 2 years, so I'll be better prepared next time. And better prepared to that part looks like more body fat. So I don't know when that kicks in for people. And my sense of it through both research and working with people is it varies. But at some point, like 3 to 5 days does not seem like that's an issue. But if we do a 30-day, I think for most people, we do kick that part of us in. And so I've known, like I had a few teachers in naturopathic school that were hardcore fasters when they were, young aspiring naturopaths or first in practice. And every single one of them told me all of them ended up fat, and all of them blamed that as part of it. Now they thought they were doing this good thing, and they were just, in my opinion, maybe doing it too long to not produce that learning. Because really, our body and brain is a learning machine. So I always step back and say, okay, what are we doing? But what might this learn from what we're doing? Because ultimately, the long term, it's what it learned and not what we did.
Yeah, so important. So last but not least, what's the best way for our listeners to reach out to you if they want to connect more or learn more about your work?
So I would go to neurohacker.com, and then we have a section pull down called Learn, where we have blogs and podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram. I think that's the channel that we put the most emphasis into, but both on Facebook and Instagram. We post new research in neuroscience and other things related to areas we're interested in, which tend to be things with, at this point, sleep, how the brain works, vision, immunity. Those would be some of the big areas.
Wonderful. So I'll put the links in the comments in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on the show today and for sharing all your insights and wisdom.
You're welcome.
So take care and talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please take a sec to rate and review my show. It would mean the world to me because you'd help me reach more entrepreneurs like yourself who would love this show. If you'd like to learn more about creating a widely successful business without sacrificing your health, relationships, or sanity, make sure to stick around and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And why don't you help me spread the word and share this show with your friends? I'd really appreciate it, and I'm sure your friends will too. Want to continue this conversation, build real relationships, and join a community of like-minded entrepreneurs? Come join my free Facebook community for visionary entrepreneurs. I would love to see you there. In the meantime, if you haven't done so already, grab my free brain priming audio file for entrepreneurs and start priming your brain for success in less than 5 minutes each morning. Curious? You can learn more about how this works and download the audio file at www.wiredforsuccess.solutions. Until next time, bye!